The Crimson was once the pride of a small mountain town, a luxury getaway built in the 1920s. But over the years, it earned a reputation no marketing campaign could erase. Guests disappeared. Employees jumped from the upper floors. Families who stayed there spoke of night terrors so vivid, they checked out before dawn. The hotel finally shut down in 1975 after a fire gutted the East Wing, killing 7 people. Since then, it's rotted on the mountainside. Its red brick exterior stained darker each year, like it's still bleeding from its wounds. Locals warned us not to go. "That place doesn't let people leave the same," one gas station attendant muttered when we stopped for supplies. I should have listened. Our team that night was small. Me, our audio tech, Emily, and our cameraman, Ryan. We'd been tipped off about strange activity by a local historian who swore he'd seen lights flickering in the windows at night. The thought of catching that kind of evidence on film was too tempting to pass up. We arrived at dusk. The Crimson loomed above the trees like a decaying giant. Broken windows stared down at us like blackened eyes. The once grand entrance doors sagged, their brass handles corroded green. As we unloaded our gear, Ryan muttered, "Feels like the building's already watching us." Inside, the air was stale, thick with smoke and mildew. The lobby stretched before us, its marble floors cracked, its chandeliers hanging by threads. Faded wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing scorched plaster underneath. My flashlight beam swept across the check-in desk, where an old ledger still sat, pages yellowed and curling. I flipped it open. The last entry read, July 17th, 1975, room 612. The very night of the fire. We set up base camp in the lobby. Emily planted audio recorders in the hallways, while Ryan checked his cameras. I did a baseline sweep with my EMF meter. It was quiet. Too quiet. No rats scurrying, no wind creaking the boards. Just silence, thick and oppressive. The first sign came around 10 p.m. Emily's recorder picked up a faint piano melody. Slow, haunting, drifting through the static. There was no piano in the hotel anymore. The fire had destroyed it. Yet the notes were clear, deliberate. We followed the sound to the dining hall. The room was charred from the fire, tables blackened, chairs overturned. But in the corner stood the remains of the piano, its keys warped and melted. And as we stood there, one of the broken keys pressed down on its own. Ryan's camera flickered. The screen went snowy for a second, then cleared. He lowered it, pale. "Something's here with us." We pressed on, climbing the grand staircase toward the upper floors. The banisters were blackened, the carpet rotted away, exposing scorched wood. On the 3rd floor, Emily froze. "Did you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing. Then faintly, a woman's sobs, muffled, echoing down the hall. We followed the sound past door after door until it stopped at room 312. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was freezing. The wallpaper was burned away, exposing blackened studs. A bed frame sat in the middle, its mattress long gone. Emily set her recorder on the frame. "If someone's here with us, can you tell us your name?" she asked softly. Silence. Then the sound of scratching, long, deliberate. On the wall above the bed, Ryan swung his camera toward it, and we all gasped. Words were etching themselves into the charred plaster, letter by letter. "Get out." Emily grabbed her recorder and stumbled back. Ryan kept filming, but his screen flickered again. I forced myself to steady my voice. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to understand what happened here." The scratching stopped. The silence was deafening. Then, laughter, high-pitched. A child's laugh echoing through the burned room. We bolted. Back in the hallway, the temperature dropped even further. our breath clouded in the beam of our flashlights. From somewhere above us came heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing across the floorboards. But the floor above us had collapsed in the fire. It was impossible. And we pressed on anyway, drawn upward toward the 6th floor, where the fire had started. Each step felt heavier, like we were walking underwater. By the time we reached the 6th floor landing, I could barely breathe. The corridor stretched in both directions, lined with charred door frames. My EMF spiked into the red. Emily clutched her recorder like a lifeline. Ryan whispered, "This doesn't feel right." We reached room 612. The door was blackened, half hanging off its hinges. Inside, the walls were scorched, the ceiling caved in, and yet the air was icy cold, colder than anywhere else in the building. Emily set her recorder down. "This is the room where the fire began," she whispered. "They say a guest set himself on fire here. Others claim it was something worse, that the fire came from nowhere." Before I could respond, Ryan's camera began to glitch violently. The screen flashed white, then black, then an image appeared. Not the room we were in, but a figure. Tall, thin, its face a blur, its body outlined in smoke. Ryan lowered the camera, shaking. "It's not showing what's in front of me." Then the door slammed shut. We jumped, spinning toward it, but worse, the floor beneath us groaned, cracking. For a moment, I thought it would collapse, taking us with it. Then Emily screamed. Her recorder was playing back, though she hadn't pressed play. A voice filled the room, deep, guttural, layered like multiple people speaking at once. "Burn with us." The walls shook. Charred plaster rained down. Ryan's camera flew from his hands, smashing against the floor. Emily clutched me, sobbing, as the temperature spiked suddenly. Not cold anymore, blistering hot. The air seared my lungs. I could smell smoke, feel flames licking at my skin, though there was no fire. And then I saw them. Figures materialized in the smoke, dozens of them, men, women, children. Their bodies blackened, flesh charred, eyes melted into hollow sockets. They screamed silently, mouths opening wide in agony. They reached for us with burned, skeletal hands. I yanked the door open and we ran. The corridor warped around us, stretching longer, twisting. The screams followed, growing louder, closer. Behind us, the shadows of burned figures filled the hall. We didn't stop until we burst through the front doors into the cold night air. We collapsed on the steps, gasping, shaking, staring back at the hotel. The windows glowed faintly, as if fire still burned inside. But then it faded, leaving only darkness. We didn't speak the entire drive back. When I reviewed the footage later, most of it was static, corrupted beyond use. But one frame survived. In room 612, the camera had captured a figure standing behind us. Tall, skeletal, its face burned away, its mouth stretched open in a silent scream. Its hand was reaching toward my shoulder. I can't explain what happened that night. Emily quit investigating entirely. Ryan hasn't touched a camera since. And me? I can't sleep in hotel rooms anymore. Doesn't matter if they're new, clean, or crowded with people. When the lights go out, I hear it. The faint crackle of flames, the sound of footsteps pacing outside my door. And sometimes, just before I drift off, I smell smoke. Hi, my name is Michael Turner. I've been part of a paranormal research group for 6 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for the night inside the Hollow Creek State Prison. I've investigated haunted homes, rural barns, and even a few abandoned factories. But the Hollow Prison was different. It wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it didn't want us to leave. Hollow Creek State Prison was shut down in 1994 after a riot killed 17 inmates and 2 guards. Official reports called it a tragic incident. But the stories whispered by former staff and surviving inmates told something darker. They said the prison had always been violent, cursed even, with unexplained deaths and prisoners driven to madness. Some claimed the riot wasn't sparked by gang rivalries at all, but by something unseen moving through the cell blocks, pushing men to slaughter one another. Our team of 4 arrived at dusk. I had my handheld camera. Evelyn, our tech expert, carried EMF meters and a thermal imager. Chris, the skeptic, handled audio. And Patrick, our cameraman, lugged the heavy gear. We were excited, nervous, but confident. That confidence wouldn't last. The prison stood like a fortress of rust and concrete, its walls rising out of the woods like a tomb. Razor wires sagged along the perimeter, and the front gates hung open as if welcoming us in. The air was still, heavy, thick with decay. As soon as I stepped out of the van, I felt the weight of it, like the ground itself didn't want us there. Inside the prison was worse. The corridors echoed with our every step, and our flashlights revealed peeling paint, rusted bars, and graffiti scrawled across every surface. "Hell still lives here," one message read in dripping black spray paint. Another, scratched into the wall by hand, simply said, "Don't listen." We set up base camp in the central guard station overlooking cell block A. Evelyn started placing cameras along the catwalks. Chris tested audio in the solitary wing, muttering under his breath about cheap thrills and ghost stories. Patrick filmed everything. Our first sweep was uneventful until we reached the cafeteria. The smell hit us first, rotten meat, like something long dead. But the place was empty. Trays and overturned tables littered the floor. Evelyn pointed her thermal imager toward the corner, and her face drained of color. "There's someone there," she whispered. We all turned, flashlights aimed at the spot. Nothing, just empty space. But on her screen, a heat signature pulsed faintly in the shape of a man sitting at a table. And then, just as suddenly, it vanished. Back at the guard station, Chris replayed his audio recordings. At first, just static, but then faint whispers. Dozens of them overlapping like a crowd chanting in a language we couldn't understand. Patrick leaned closer. "Play that again." Chris did. This time a single voice rose above the others, deep and guttural. "Hungry." The word echoed in the room long after the recording stopped. None of us spoke for a while. Around midnight, we decided to split up, Evelyn and Patrick in the infirmary, Chris and I in the solitary wing. In hindsight, splitting up was the worst mistake we could have made. The solitary wing was a nightmare of concrete and steel. The cells were tiny, just slabs of rusted metal with doors bolted shut. I ran my camera along the hallway, narrating quietly. These cells once held the most dangerous inmates, murderers, rapists, men who'd lost their minds. A loud clang cut me off. Chris and I spun around. One of the cell doors had slammed shut, but none of us had touched it. He swallowed hard and muttered, "Draft." But there was no draft. The air was suffocatingly still. Then came the scratching, long, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across metal, from inside the closed cell. Chris raised his recorder. "Is someone here with us?" The scratching stopped. Silence. And then, from behind the door, a whisper. "Yes." My blood ran cold. I lifted my camera, praying it was just an echo, a trick. But the voice came again, louder this time, distorted, angry. "Yes." We backed away, but the entire row of cells erupted at once. Metallic bangs, voices screaming, doors rattling violently, as if invisible prisoners were thrashing against them. My camera shook in my hands as I ran. Chris dropped his recorder in panic, leaving it behind. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Patrick were in the infirmary. Later, Evelyn told me what happened there. They found rusted gurneys and cabinets filled with shattered glass bottles. But then the temperature plummeted. Frost formed along the edges of the gurney. Patrick's camera froze, static crawling across the lens, and then he saw them. Figures, dozens of them, lined up on the gurneys. Inmates with hollow eyes, jaws broken, faces mangled. Not flesh and blood, but shadows flickering like dying flames. Patrick screamed and stumbled back, but Evelyn grabbed him. The shadows vanished. We regrouped in the central guard station, pale and shaken. "This place," Evelyn whispered, "it's not just haunted. It's feeding off us, as if to prove her right." The building groaned. A deep, thunderous vibration rattled the walls. The lights on our equipment flickered wildly. And then, through the intercom system, dead since the 90s, a voice crackled. It was deep, distorted, and angry. "Stay in your cells." We froze. The speakers screeched. And then a sound like hundreds of fists pounding metal doors filled the prison. We couldn't stay any longer. We decided to pack up. But the prison wasn't done with us. On the way out, we had to cross cell block B. The catwalks above rattled with phantom footsteps. The cells glowed faintly, like light bleeding from nowhere. And then, one by one, the doors began to open. Not physically, no hinges moved. But inside my head, I heard it. The doors opening, prisoners stepping out. Breathing down my neck, I could feel them brushing past me. Patrick screamed suddenly. I spun around and he was gone. Just gone. His camera lay shattered on the floor. We searched, shouting his name. The prison swallowed our voices. And then we saw him on the other side of the bars, deeper in the block. His face was pale, eyes wide as if he couldn't see us. He opened his mouth and screamed, but no sound came out. And then hands, dozens of them, shadowy, skeletal hands, reached out from the darkness, dragging him back, his face twisted in silent terror. And then he was gone. We ran. I don't remember how we got out. One second we were inside, the next we were outside the gates, gasping for air under the cold night sky. Evelyn collapsed, sobbing. Chris vomited in the dirt. I just stood there shaking, clutching my camera. Patrick was never found. His disappearance was written off as a tragic accident. Another urban legend tied to the prison. But I know the truth. When I reviewed my footage later, I found only one clear frame from that night. It was when Patrick vanished. The camera had caught a glimpse of what was behind him. A figure, tall and gaunt, with eyes like burning coals and a mouth filled with jagged teeth. Its body stretched unnaturally long, as if made of shadows and smoke. And it was reaching for him. I don't go ghost hunting anymore. Evelyn quit too. Chris drinks himself to sleep. Patrick's family never forgave us, but sometimes late at night, my phone rings. When I answer, all I hear is static. And beneath it, faintly, Patrick's voice. "I can't get out." Hi, my name is Evan Myers. I've been part of a paranormal research group for almost 4 years. I always thought I could handle anything. Strange whispers, moving shadows, cold spots, even full-bodied apparitions. But what happened at the Caldwell farmhouse broke me in ways I can't put into words. It's the case that still wakes me in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, because sometimes I hear the children's voices again. The Caldwell farmhouse sits on the outskirts of a small Midwestern town. It's been abandoned since 1983, when the last family that lived there disappeared without a trace. Before them, 3 other families had tried to make a life there. Each one left abruptly, selling the property for next to nothing, or in 2 cases, vanishing just like the Caldwells. Locals say the land is cursed, that nothing grows there, and that at night you can hear singing from the empty windows. Naturally, we were drawn to it. My team that night was smaller than usual. Just me, David, our equipment tech, and Laura, who handled audio and research. We were supposed to meet 2 others, but they bailed last minute, spooked by the farmhouse's reputation. In hindsight, I wish I'd bailed too. We arrived just before sundown. The farmhouse stood alone in the middle of dead fields, its roof sagging, windows dark. The air smelled faintly of rot and wet earth. Even from the van, I could feel it. The heaviness, the stillness, like the world itself held its breath around that place. Inside the house was a time capsule of abandonment. Furniture covered in dust, wallpaper peeling, children's toys scattered across the floor as if dropped mid-play. I bent down and picked up a doll, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing. For some reason, holding it made me feel sick, so I set it back down. We set up our gear in the living room. David installed cameras in the main rooms while Laura placed audio recorders upstairs. I walked through with my handheld narrating. The Caldwell farmhouse, last inhabited in 1983, when James and Margaret Caldwell, along with their 2 children, vanished. Their car was found in the driveway, dinner was still on the table, but the family was never seen again. To this day, the case remains unsolved. It didn't take long for things to start. In the kitchen, Laura and I heard it, a faint humming, childlike sing-song drifting from the hallway. We froze. "David, are you playing something on the monitors?" I called through the walkie. "No," he said. His voice was sharp, nervous. "Why?" "Because we're hearing something." The humming grew louder, clearer. A nursery rhyme, though I couldn't place which one. I raised my camera. "Hello? Is someone here with us?" Silence. And then, footsteps overhead. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth across the upstairs hallway. We rushed upstairs, but the hall was empty. Dust lay thick across the wooden floorboards, undisturbed. But Laura pointed at one of the bedrooms. The door, which had been closed before, was wide open. We stepped inside. It was a child's room, toys scattered, a small bed in the corner. The air was icy cold, my breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. I scanned the room, whispering, "If you're here, can you give us a sign?" The closet door creaked open. I aimed my camera. Nothing inside but shelves and old clothes. Then Laura gasped. She was holding her recorder, and through the static, a voice came through, a little girl's voice. "Play with us." I've heard EVPs before. Whispers, faint responses, sometimes even laughter. But this wasn't like that. This was clear, sharp. It felt like the child was standing right in front of us. Laura bolted from the room, panic written across her face. I forced myself to stay, filming the closet. My gut screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. Not yet. Then, just as I turned to follow her, something giggled behind me. I didn't look. I just ran. Back downstairs, David was pale as a ghost. "Check the monitors," he said. His hands shook as he pointed at the screens. On the living room camera, we saw it. A figure standing in the corner, small, about the size of a child. It just stood there unmoving, staring at the camera. Its features were blurred like static, but you could see its eyes, 2 dark hollows that seemed to burn through the lens. We ran into the living room, but it was empty, just empty. For a while, nothing else happened. We tried to regroup, calm ourselves. Laura wanted to leave immediately, but David insisted we stay until at least 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Around 2:45, the house came alive. It started with the piano in the parlor. A single note played, then another, forming a clumsy, halting melody. We rushed in, but the piano was covered in dust, keys broken and yellowed. Still, as we watched, a key pressed down on its own. Then another. The melody grew louder, faster, and then a child's laugh echoed through the house. We scrambled to shut down the equipment, but every device went haywire. Cameras static, recorders screeching with distortion. David cursed and tried to pull the batteries, but his hands were shaking too much. Then came the stomping. Heavy footsteps, pounding across the upstairs floor, rattling the ceiling above us. But these weren't childlike. They were heavy, adult, angry. The lights flickered, though the house had no power. The air thickened, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe. And then, from the stairs came a shadow. It was tall, hunched, its limbs too long. It moved slowly, deliberately, dragging itself down one step at a time. Its head was bent at an unnatural angle, and from its mouth came a sound I'll never forget. A deep, guttural growl, layered with voices, like a chorus of the damned. Laura screamed. David dropped the monitor and grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Now we bolted for the door, but as I glanced back, I saw them, figures filling the hallway, small shapes peeking from behind door frames. Children, dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. And behind them, the tall shadow loomed, watching. We didn't stop running until we reached the van. Laura sobbed uncontrollably. David sat in silence, shaking. I stared at the farmhouse, its dark windows staring back like eyes. For a split second, I swore I saw the curtain in the upstairs window move, like someone was watching us leave. When I reviewed the footage later, most of it was corrupted. Static, black frames, nothing useful, except for one clip. In the child's bedroom, the closet camera caught movement. Not just the door opening, but something stepping out. At first, it looked like a little girl, hair in braids, wearing a faded dress. But as the figures stepped closer to the camera, its face began to change. The skin cracked, peeled, melted away, revealing a hollow void where a face should have been. And just before the feed cut, the figure leaned close to the camera, tilting its head, as a voice whispered directly into the mic. "You'll come back." We never went back. Laura quit the team. David refuses to even speak about that night. And me? Sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear humming, faint, childlike, drifting from the shadows. And I know whatever was in that farmhouse, it followed me.
Hi, my name is Daniel Reyes, and I've been a paranormal investigator for almost 9 years. I've been to places most people wouldn't dare to step foot in. Abandoned prisons, forgotten churches, derelict houses in the middle of nowhere. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what I experienced inside the old Fairchild Asylum. It's the one case that made me question everything I believed about the line between the living and the dead. And to this day, I can't get the screams out of my head. It all started when a small-town historical society contacted my team. They had acquired the deed to the Fairchild Asylum, a psychiatric hospital shut down in 1978 after reports of abuse, illegal experiments, and dozens of unexplained deaths surfaced. The state had ignored it for years, leaving the building to rot on the edge of town like a scar nobody wanted to acknowledge. Rumors spread. People said shadows walked the halls, that if you stood too long in the main ward, you'd hear patients crying out for help. A few locals claimed to have seen figures in the windows at night, even though the place had no electricity. Naturally, a story like that was irresistible to us. My crew, Lena, the tech specialist, Marcus, the skeptic with a background in history, and Jordan, our cameraman, loaded up our gear and made the drive out. The asylum rose before us like a dark cathedral, 4 stories of broken windows and collapsing walls. Even from the outside, I could feel it breathing. The air was heavy, still, suffocating. As we unpacked, Lena muttered, "You feel that?" It's like the building's watching us inside. The air was damp and filled with mold. The floor crunched with glass shards from shattered windows. Our flashlights cut through the pitch-black corridors, revealing graffiti, peeling paint, and rusted gurneys left behind like corpses. The deeper we went, the colder it got, though it was the middle of summer. We set up our equipment in the central ward. Lena installed static cameras and EMF readers. Marcus unpacked his recorder for EVPS, electronic voice phenomena. I walked around with my handheld camera, narrating our setup. We're standing in what used to be the main ward, where patients were kept in shared rooms. Over 50 deaths were reported here between 1950 and 1978, though most records were mysteriously destroyed before the asylum closed. From the start, it felt wrong. The silence was alive, like hundreds of eyes were on us from every corner. The first strange thing happened within an hour. We were doing a baseline sweep when the temperature dropped. Fast. My breath came out in white clouds. Then, over the static of Marcus's recorder, we heard it. A faint whisper. Lena froze, eyes wide. Marcus replayed the audio, and clear as day we heard, "Get out." We tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was wind, maybe interference. But the asylum had no power, and the windows were boarded up tight. Still, Marcus shook his head, pretending not to be rattled. "Could be radio bleed," he muttered, though I could see his hands trembling. Hours passed. We moved to the surgical wing, where rumors said unlicensed procedures were done on patients. Rusted surgical tables sat under broken ceiling lights. Chains hung from the walls, and dried stains I didn't want to think about marked the tiles. Jordan kept filming, but then his camera glitched. Static, flickers, and then the screen went black. "Battery's dead," he said, frustrated, but we had just fully charged it an hour ago. At the same time, Lena's EMF reader spiked into the red, beeping wildly. Then footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps echoed down the hall. We froze. Nobody was outside. Our van was parked at the entrance, and the nearest houses were miles away. We killed our flashlights. The footsteps grew louder, closer, stopping just at the doorway. My heart was slamming against my chest. I forced myself to raise my camera even though it was pitch black. The silence stretched, and then screams. Not from outside, not from one person, but dozens. Men and women, shrill, agonized, overlapping, filling the hall like a tidal wave of suffering. We clamped our hands over our ears, but the sound wasn't just external. It was inside our heads. Lena dropped her EMF meter, sobbing. Marcus muttered, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" like a prayer. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. We stood there gasping for air, the stink of iron and rot filling our noses. Jordan whispered, "Please, can we leave?" But I shook my head. Something in me needed to know what was here, what caused this. I regret that now. We pressed deeper into the asylum, into the basement where the most violent patients were once chained. The stairs creaked, threatening to collapse. The deeper we went, the more oppressive it became. Like the air itself was pushing back against us, warning us away. At the bottom, the corridor stretched into darkness. Our lights revealed cells with rusted bars. Scratches covered the walls, words, names, drawings. Some scratched so deep into the concrete that fingernails must have broken in the attempt. Lena pointed her flashlight into one of the cells and screamed. For a split second, I saw it too. A figure standing there, tall, skeletal, its head tilted unnaturally, eye sockets black and empty. And then it was gone. We ran into the central chamber of the basement where a massive chair stood bolted to the floor. Leather straps hung loose, cracked with age. Medical tools were scattered around, covered in rust. It looked like a torture chamber more than a treatment room. Marcus, pale and shaking, whispered, "This wasn't a hospital. This was hell." I raised my camera and asked, "Is there anyone here with us?" The recorder crackled and a voice came through. Not a whisper, but a guttural scream. "Stay." The lights went out. total darkness. Jordan fumbled with his flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. None of ours did. Then the chair in the middle of the room began to shake violently, scraping against the floor. The sound was deafening in the dark. I felt something cold grip my wrist. I yanked my arm back and shone my useless flashlight toward it, but there was nothing. Then, breathing, right in my ear, hot, ragged, angry. Lena shrieked and collapsed. Marcus and I dragged her up and we bolted. As we ran, the corridor stretched unnaturally, like the building itself was bending. Doors slammed shut behind us. Shadows moved along the walls, reaching out. I swear one of them brushed my back, cold and wet like rotting flesh. When we finally burst back into the main ward, the emergency lights, dead for decades, flashed on by themselves. Red, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then we saw them. Dozens of figures lined the walls, translucent, twisted, their mouths open in silent screams. Patients, doctors, nurses, all staring at us with hollow eyes. Lena sobbed hysterically. Marcus dropped to his knees, whispering a prayer. Jordan screamed at me, "Daniel, we have to go." Now! I forced my legs to move. We ran, tripping over debris until we burst out the front doors into the night air. The asylum loomed behind us, silent and dark once more, as if nothing had happened. We didn't speak on the drive back. Lena sat curled in the back seat, shaking. Marcus stared out the window, pale as a ghost himself. Jordan kept muttering, "We shouldn't have gone. We shouldn't have gone." When I reviewed the footage later, most of it was corrupted, static, black screens, distorted audio. But one file survived. The camera had caught the moment in the basement when the lights went out. For a few frames, something moved in front of the lens. It wasn't a patient, it wasn't human at all. It had a skull-like face, stretched too long with jagged teeth and empty eyes. And it was smiling. I've never gone back to Fairchild Asylum. Lena quit ghost hunting altogether. Marcus refuses to talk about that night. Jordan moved away and cut off all contact. But me? I can't stop thinking about it. About that voice screaming, "Stay." About the eyes staring at us from the dark. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing evidence from other cases, I hear it again. That same guttural voice, faint, just behind me, whispering into my ear, "You never left."